What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video. Today we'll be going over every backfield, talking about which running backs I'd be starting and sitting. But before we do that, of course, have to start things off with the stat of the day. Yesterday's stat was who leads the league in air yards per target, and the answer is Marquez Valdez-Scantling, and Eaton Schechter was the first to get that one right. Today's stat, as we all know, Deontay Johnson leads the league in drops, but who has the second most drops among any player? All right, so another 16-game week, and we actually have some Saturday games this week, which is exciting and something to know. Everyone make sure that they're not starting players on Thursday night. Make sure, if you've got guys on Saturday, you've made your decision before Saturday, because you don't want to accidentally bench or start someone in the fantasy semifinals. So we'll start off with the Thursday night game. That's going to be between the Chargers and the Raiders. This game has a pretty high 53-point over-under, and the Raiders are 3.5-point home favorites. For the Raiders, Jacobs has been, I'd say, fairly mediocre recently. He's averaging 10 carries, 3 receptions over his last 2 games, failing to get over 60% of the snaps in either contest. The thing is, we know Jacobs is somewhat game script dependent. Like last year, it was definitely worse. He's been better, being more consistent this season, but he still loses a lot of his role when they get really far behind. And that's, been the case these last 2 weeks. They've been destroyed each of the last 2 matchups, so it's not all that surprising. The volume hasn't really been there. They should at least be competitive in this one. I mean, they're favored to win the game, but I'd be very, very surprised if the Raiders just got absolutely destroyed. And because of that, and because the Chargers rank 31st in rush defense DVOA, I think that we can pretty confidently play Jacobs as a running back 2. I think the floor is a little bit low to be trusting him as your running back 1, although, I guess if you have to, right? But I think he's a good play as a running back 2. In the average game script, they're probably going to be leading for a good chunk of the game, and that's when Jacobs is going to be at his best. Remember, the high total means that the scoring chances for Jacobs are there. So I think in that running back 13 to 17 range is probably where he should be ranked, and that's just mid-range running back 2. Although, as you'll know later in the video, I guess, as we go over all of these teams, there are a lot of running backs in that 13, 14 to 20, 22 kind of range. A lot of them are pretty much the same play. There's not very much separating all of the running back 2s this week. So when I say someone's a high end, a mid-range, a low end 2, there's not that much of a difference between all of them. It's just kind of where the rankings fall, but there's not much separating them. For the Chargers, Eckler, you're starting him every single week. He's actually getting very unlucky with the touchdowns, and so I'm pretty sure that's going to change sometime soon. And when he starts scoring, the upside in fantasy is immense. And don't start any of the other backup running backs on the Chargers. Next game up is our first Saturday game. I believe it's at 4:25, might be 4:30 Eastern, but sometime around there. And that's going to be Bills at Broncos. This game has a 50-point over-under, and the Bills are 6.5-point road favorites. For the Bills, Singletary hasn't finished with more than 10 fantasy points or been a top 20 running back since week 4. That's pretty incredible. He's got such a large stretch just being entirely mediocre. Moss has done so twice since week 8. But he's been much more up and down. He's been hitting that ceiling a few times, but the floor has been incredibly low. So the Bills are favorites, and the Broncos have a pretty below average run defense, but I would not trust either of these two outside of deeper formats. 14-team league, sure, you can go there, but again, if you made it to the semifinals and you're trusting Moss or Singletary each week, I don't really know how you made it there unless you're in a deeper format, and I would just prefer to bench both these guys unless one of them just gets all the opportunity, which does not seem like it's going to happen. For the Broncos, pretty similar story. Melvin Gordon and Philip Lindsay are maxing out on the high end at 15, 16 touches each, and with a lot of those coming on the ground. So this week, they're going to be underdogs. They're going to be against a Bills defense that's not elite, but it's definitely above average. Watch one thing, and that's Gordon's status this week. He does have a minor injury. It doesn't seem like it's going to be a big deal. It seems like to me that he's going to play, but obviously sometimes injuries are worse than they appear to us. It's worse than they let on. And so if Gordon is out, then, well, now Lindsey becomes a much more appealing play, and he would go right into that discussion with all the other running back twos. He'd be like a mid-range running back two if he's going to play all those snaps. But again, I would need Gordon to be out to trust anyone on this team. Panthers at Packers is up next. This game has a 51.5 point total, and the Packers are 8.5 point home favorites. For the Panthers, it looks like McCaffrey is going to be out for another week. Really stinks, but it means we're going to have Mike Davis as the back. And this one, he hasn't been as involved as he was when McCaffrey first went down, but he'll get enough volume in this matchup to be definitely worth the start. The Packers rank 22nd in rush defense DVOA. They've allowed the 5th most fantasy points to opposing running backs. So given that he should see around like 15 to 17 touches, he should be treated as, I would say he's more on the high end. So in those running back twos, I'd say he's much closer to running back one this week because the matchup is just incredible. For the Packers, always start Aaron Jones. Then Jamal Williams, there are some times that we can play him, but I don't expect this to be a game where the Packers just absolutely annihilate the Panthers and the entire fourth quarter is just all Jamal Williams time. I think it'll be close enough throughout to where he's still just going to remain one of the highest upside handcuffs, someone you should still have on your bench, but not someone that you're starting this week. On to Sunday, where our first game up is going to be Lions at Titans. This game has a 51.5 point total, and the Titans are pretty big 10.5 point home favorites. For the Lions, it comes down to Matthew Stafford. Swift is going to be an exceptional play if Stafford is active, but his upside is definitely lower if Stafford is out. It seems like Stafford is just not going to practice all week, and then we'll probably find out on Friday how close he is to playing, but it might come down to a game time decision. Just a situation to keep an eye on. Right now I have Swift as the running back 21, but if Stafford is the quarterback in this game and we think he's good to go, I mean, he could move up anywhere to like the running back 14, 15. I mean, he could be a high-end running back too. I really think they're shifting a lot more of the workload to Swift. I mean, Peterson played 17 snaps, Carrion played 15 snaps, and I think those shrink and Swift's goes up this week. And so in a high total game, in a game where, I mean, the Titans really don't have that great of a defense, he could have a lot of receptions. He has touchdown upside, yardage upside. Like, he could be a fantastic play if Stafford is in there. But if we're relying on Chase Daniel, the upside and the floor both come down. So got to see who's playing. Right now he's at 21. I think that if Chase Daniel is out there at quarterback, he might move down to like 23, 24. But I think he might just stay close to where he is because, again, I do think they're going to use him a lot. And then if Stafford's back, I think you're playing him no matter what. For the Titans, pretty easy. Always start Derrick Henry, and we're not starting any of their backups. Next up, we've got 49ers at Cowboys. This game is a 45-point total, and the 49ers are 3-point road favorites. For the 49ers, Mostert suffered an ankle injury on Sunday, and McKinnon didn't even play. So if Mostert is out, then you got to think Jeff Wilson's going to see a pretty big boost to his workload, probably going to be featured between the 20s, probably going to have a red zone role. I never want to call a 49ers running back a featured back because they just never do it. At least recently, they have not done that. And so I would have to think Wilson would be a really good play, one with a lot of upside, but by no means would be a must start. He would be going up against a Cowboys defense that ranks 27th in rush defense DVOA, 32nd in yards per carry allowed. So again, Mostert out. I think Wilson is in the discussion with all those other running back twos. I'll see where exactly he shakes out in the rankings as I update that throughout the week, but I would think he'd be like a solid running back two. If Mostert is active, both are flex viable, but they're going to split the work. It's going to be random where the touchdowns are. Neither is going to catch all that many passes, and so I would really prefer to only play a 49ers running back if Mostert is out. For Dallas, Zeke is going to get decent volume. He's been getting decent volume in most weeks. He didn't get as much last week because, I mean, that game was not close. It was not going to be close. Like, you just don't need to use Zeke for 25 carries when you're easily going to win. You can use Pollard. And so it's not shocking he didn't see a incredible number of touches. But again, it's what we always talked about. The floor and the ceiling are lower without Dak. He was a top 16 running back in all 5 weeks where Dak played, and he's been a top 16 running back only once in the 8 weeks since. The 49ers also have a really solid run defense, and the Cowboys are underdogs in this one, even though they definitely can win. It's not a huge spread. On average, they lose. And so I can really only rank Zeke on the lower end of those running back twos, around the running back 20. Bears at Vikings is up next. This game has an average, I would say, 46.5 point total, and the Vikings are currently 3.5 point home favorites. For the Bears, David Montgomery is the running back 2 overall in these last 3 weeks, averaging 23.5 fantasy points per game. You never would have thought that would happen to start the season, but it's really because he's been facing just the worst run defenses in the league. And while the Vikings aren't elite, they're definitely the toughest defense he's faced over this last month. And the Bears are also road underdogs, which is never a good thing for a running back. So this is the first time since week 9 that he's not in a smash spot. And I think you'd still probably got to play him if you have him, but he's much more of a running back 2, even though he's been a running back 1. He's been the running back 2 overall in these last 3 weeks. We've been ranking him as a running back 1. I don't think he's that high. I think this week more of a 2 because he's still going to get a ton of volume, and I mean, he still has reception upside when they're losing. So running back 2 this week. For the Vikings, always start Dalvin Cook. No one else while Dalvin Cook is healthy. They're all still just high upside backups. Bucks at Falcons is up next. This game has a 50.5 point total, and the Bucks are currently 6 point road favorites. For the Bucks, Leonard Fournette was a healthy scratch coming out of their bye last week, and that allowed Ronald Jones to play 67% of the snaps, which was his second most on the season, and he turned that into 19 touches for 84 yards and a touchdown. Assuming that Fournette is inactive again, then you're playing Ronald Jones. Just know that the Falcons do have a better run defense than most people think, and they're not as attackable through the air as they have been. Because over the last few years, it's been like, maybe they're not just the worst run defense in general, but every single team just checks down to running backs against them, and they allow so many receptions to running backs. That is not the case this season, and so this is not a good spot for Ronald Jones. But again, he's a favorite, and if Fournette is inactive again, he's going to be the goal line back, the majority of the early down back, so you're playing him if Fournette is out. For the Falcons, I'd continue benching all of their running backs, especially in, the most or second most difficult possible matchup. Next up, we've got the Texans at the Colts. This game has a 51 point total, and the Colts are 7.5 point home favorites. For the Texans, David Johnson is expected back this week as a massive underdog against a really solid Colts run defense. So honestly, you're not playing David, you're not playing Duke. Just bench both these guys. For the Colts, Jonathan Taylor has pretty much taken over the backfield in recent weeks, and he looks like the elite running back we thought he was going to be this summer. He is a lock and load play. I have him as running back 7, I think, but you're playing him for sure. He could easily be the running back 1 overall this week. Hines is flex viable because the matchup is great. They should score a lot of points, and they do give him the ball in the red zone at times. And he's, of course, involved in the receiving game a lot. He's by no means a must play. I said he's flex viable, but I think I got him in that running back 24 to 27 kind of range. That's probably where he'll fall. And so if you need to play him, don't feel bad about that. But also if you saying, oh, can I bench him? Yeah, because Jonathan Taylor is taking over. And so could Hines have 7 touches? Absolutely. So if you want to bench him, by no means is he a must start. Next up, we've got Seattle at Washington. This game is a fairly low 44.5 point total, and the Seahawks are 5.5 point road favorites. For Seattle, Carson and Hyde may have split the snaps last week, but it was fairly clear that Carson is the lead back. They just happen to be playing the Jets, so you can kind of just throw normal game scripts out the window. Carson is another week removed from his injury, and he should be expected under a normal scenario to see 18 to 20 touches, maybe even the potential to see 22 to 24 touches in this one. He's going to have a sizable workload in the receiving game. He's going to have immense touchdown upside. It is not an easy matchup against a really solid Washington run defense, but any running back getting that sort of workload with that sort of touchdown upside just needs to be played, and Hyde should just stay on benches as a really high upside handcuff. For Washington, all depends on Gibson. We'll have to see how much he's practicing this week. If he's out again, then McKissick is like a decent flex play, I'd say, in full PPR formats. But it's worth noting, I mean, the Seahawks have a really, really good run defense. They're a tough team to run on, and he gets most of his value in the receiving game. So again, full PPR, that's fine in the flex. Probably not a must start even in full PPR. And then if we're going to half PPR, I don't know. I mean, it's probably only a deeper format play. In a 10 or a 12-team league, in standard or half PPR, you're really just not playing J.D. McKissick, especially this late in the season. 14-team full PPR, we can have that discussion then. Next up, Patriots at Dolphins. This game has a 41.5-point total, and the Dolphins are 2.5-point home favorites, although worth noting it's possible that line shifts more towards the Patriots if we get bad news on the Dolphins skill players. I have no idea right now if Gesicki, Parker, Grant, if those guys are playing, but if like all of those guys are out, they're going to struggle to move the ball, and maybe we see the line shift more towards the Patriots. But for the Patriots, Damian Harris has gone over 12 fantasy points one time on the entire season, largely because he has 7 targets on the entire season. He's also at risk of losing touches. I mean, the Dolphins are still favored as of right now, and so if the Dolphins go ahead in this game, Harris can be game scripted out. So really, he's not a ceiling play. We just talked about over 12 fantasy points once. And he's not a floor play because, I mean, he could have 2 fantasy points pretty easy in this one. So luckily for him, the Dolphins' run defense is, I would say, fairly mediocre. And it's possible that the Patriots really lean on the run in this one. Teams in general do lean more run heavy when they face the Dolphins. So when we have a Patriots team that already loves to run it, who could end up being favorites if the skill players of the Dolphins are out, and the Dolphins shift people more towards the run, I'm not saying that you need to play Damian Harris, but there is a chance that he does have a really nice game. He could see 22 carries for 120 yards and a touchdown. That is in his range of outcomes. The problem is, if he's not going to have any catches, he needs 100 yards and a touchdown just to get to 16 fantasy points, whereas someone who's getting, 3 or 4 receptions can get there much easier. So note that he's a risky play, but if we see the skill players of the Dolphins being out, we can shift a little bit more towards Harris, and I wouldn't really play any of the other Patriots running backs. For the Dolphins, the only running backs that I would trust are Ahmed and Gaskin, and it really doesn't seem like Gaskin's going to be back off the COVID list this week. So if Ahmed is back, maybe we can look at him. But honestly, I don't know, I'd rather just avoid this backfield. It feels like a really messy situation to use in the fantasy semifinals. And so if you can, just avoid this team in general. Next up, we've got the Jaguars at the Ravens. This game is a 47.5-point total, and the Ravens are pretty big, 13-point home favorites. Of course, Jaguars tanking at this point, so that's why they're such big underdogs. For the Jaguars, though, we're always starting James Robinson. He has earned the role as a must-start this season. For the Ravens, Mark Ingram played 1 snap this week, and he should not be owned anymore. Then Dobbins and Gus took most of the remaining volume, with Justice Hill mixing in on a few third downs. Gus had the big game with the 2 touchdowns and a few really nice, touchdown runs. But he also only played 27% of the snaps. Dobbins was up to 62%, and it really seems like he's going to stay above 60% to close the season. That is fantastic news, as nearly 2 touchdown home favorites against a Jaguars defense that ranks 27th in rush defense DVOA, 30th in yards per carry allowed, and has given up the 4th most fantasy points to opposing running backs. Dobbins, he's given me back-to-back just walk-off wins to get into the playoffs, then to win the first matchup. So there's just no way that I am benching him in this matchup. And I do think that he's like a mid to high end running back 2 this week. So if your running back core is elite, you've got 2 running back 1s, and then you want to use maybe wide receiver in the flex spot, you can definitely bench Dobbins, because he is not going to see potentially any targets, but he's not going to see many in general. but know that I am playing him because he's done so much for me. And again, I mean, nearly two touchdown home favorite against a really bad run defense. Yeah, that's a running back that I want, especially when they're as talented as Dobbins. And then as for Gus, like I know he scored the 2 touchdowns, but like I said, he's not playing that many snaps, and so if you take those touchdowns away, he's not going to do all that great. So I would not be playing Gus. Next up, we've got a great game between the Jets and the Rams. This one has a 43.5 point total, and the Rams are massive, 17-point home favorites. For the Jets, just fade this backfield and honestly fade the entire team. The Rams have an elite defense. The Jets are not going to do anything in this one. Don't play a Jets player. For the Rams, Akers is an auto play at this point, especially in a dream spot like this. It's possible one of the other running backs hits. Like if the Rams get up by 20, 25 points, well, maybe they're using Malcolm Brown and Henderson because they don't need to use Akers. But they still used Akers a lot last week when they were clearly winning that game, and clearly the Patriots were not going to win. And so Akers has crazy high upside this week. You're playing him, and again, I don't think you can play Henderson or Brown at this point. Like there's just no way I'd trust them in the semifinals. Eagles at Cardinals up next. This game is a 49.5 point total, and the Cardinals are 6.5 point home favorites. For the Eagles, we touched on them in this week's running back breakdown video, but the swap to Hurts from Carson Wentz is a massive boost for Miles Sanders. He goes from someone that we're benching to a pretty quality play, and he's actually my running back 10 on the week. The Cardinals have a pretty league average run defense, but there could be a lot of plays in this game. There could be a lot of scoring in this game, and just the threat of Hurts running the ball is going to open up lanes for Miles Sanders. He's fresh off 81% of the snaps. He was used as a feature back last week. I have him in 2 out of 3 leagues, and I will be playing him in the semifinals in both of those leagues because I do trust that his role is back. For the Cardinals, Drake has actually finished the top 20 running back in 4 straight games thanks to 5 touchdowns over the last 4 weeks. Right now, I have him as a low-end running back too, but as a home favorite against the, I'd say, fairly average Eagles run defense, it wouldn't surprise me if he boosts up more into that running back 15 range. Again, basically everyone in that 13 to like 21, 22 range is almost the same play. Not much is separating any of them, so he's right in that mix. He's very likely to score a touchdown. If he doesn't, he'll disappoint you. But if he does score that touchdown, he's probably going to finish around the running back 14 to 16. And I think that's roughly where he'll be ranked at the end of the day. But I don't want to promise you that because right now he's a little bit lower than that. For Edmonds, his role just isn't really changing. He's going to see around 6 or 7 carries. He's going to see about 5 targets each week. That is really only enough to be viewed as like a second flex option, a deeper format. He's going to need to score. His scoring chances are relatively low, and so he's someone that I would just keep on the bench as a very, very high upside handcuff to Drake. Next up, we have probably the best game of the week with Kansas City traveling to New Orleans to take on the Saints. This game is a 51.5 point total, and the Chiefs are 3-point road favorites. For the Chiefs, Clyde was back up to 74% of these snaps, and he handled 21 touches for 91 yards. It is very clear that the Chiefs want Clyde to be the lead back, but it's not going to matter as much this week as they take on the Saints' top 2 run defense. It's very likely that Kansas City just leans on the passing game in this one, and although that could mean a few extra targets for Clyde, I would consider the floor much lower than usual here, and I do have him as running back 22 right now. He's basically the last of those running back 2s, and I do not see him increasing from there. So there are some running backs who could move from like 20 to 15. I think he's going to finish around that like 21 to 23 range. So basically all the running backs I've mentioned as running back 2s leading up to this are probably all preferred over Clyde this week because the matchup is just brutal. For the Saints, the Chiefs are pretty attackable on the ground. They have a really, really good defense, but they're basically built to say, all right, our offense is so good that they're going to score into the 20s fairly quickly, and we want to force teams to pass, and they'll be really good against the pass. But if the Saints can keep this game close and keep this game on the ground on their offense, they can definitely succeed. The Chiefs are attackable on the ground. So especially with Taysom Hill at quarterback, that's going to make Alvin Kamara more efficient on the ground. Remember, we still prefer Drew Brees because the receptions are so much higher, but we saw the receptions return last week, and we've seen the touchdowns return these last 2 weeks. So Alvin Kamara, definitely playing him as a running back 1. The return of some of these touches for Kamara has bumped them away from Latavius Murray, and so if he was going to get like 12 touches in this one, I might play Murray, but he's only seen 12 combined touches over the last 2 weeks, and so he's a bit too thin of a play at this point in the season. The Sunday night game is going to be Browns at Giants, and this game has a 45.5 point total, and the Browns are 3.5 point road favorites. For the Browns, always start Nick Chubb. Hunt had a really good game last week, but realized it did only come on 12 total touches, and one of his touchdowns did come when they pulled Chubb off the field, or Chubb actually pulled himself off the field, and then they just gave it to Hunt for the touchdown, and so don't expect him to have 12 touches and finish as the running back 4 over time. In general, if he's getting 12 touches, he's not finishing as high as he did last week. It was really just because of the 2 touchdowns. The Giants do have a really solid run defense, so the matchup isn't fantastic, and I basically have Clyde and Hunt as the exact same plays. So what I just said for Clyde, and the fact that Clyde's probably not going to see much work on the ground, you can have a few receptions, you can score a touchdown, that's exactly how I feel about Hunt. He's probably not going to do all that much on the ground, and his upside really comes in the potential for targets, the potential for touchdowns through the air, and so they're basically both a similar play in that running back 22-23 kind of range. Final game of the week is going to be Monday Night Football, where the Steelers will take on the Bengals. This game is not going to be close. It has the lowest total of the week at 40.5 points, and as of right now, the Steelers are 12.5 to 13 point favorites. That is really all that's keeping James Conner in the discussion this week. This is a pass-first team. He is by no means a must-play, especially when it came out that he is dealing with a quad injury. So maybe that's why he's not being used as much, but really it's just the offense. We've talked about this offense before. This is a quick passing offense. They want to get the ball out quickly. They want to throw much more than they run, and that does not benefit the running backs at all, and especially doesn't benefit the running backs when they're rotating different guys. So if he's still going to have this quad injury, they're going to rotate running backs. They're going to throw a lot. It's probably not the best play in the world. You can use him if you need to, because if they're going to potentially win this game by more than 2 touchdowns, well, then you're going to want to have the running back on the team that's up by 2 touchdowns, because then they're much more likely to run it. Again, you're going to need that, though, because he's not being used that much in general. For the Bengals, just avoid this team. Travion Williams is the name to keep in mind. It's possible that we see a lot more of him throughout these last few weeks, so that, maybe they want to see what they have in this kid, but they're playing the Steelers. I mean, we weren't even playing this backfield when they were playing the Cowboys. Why are we going to start now? So that's a breakdown of every backfield in week 15. Remember that the website is free for the rest of 2020, so you can see my exact rankings at all positions over there, as well as a bunch of other information. It's thefantasyfootballadvice.com. That's the end of this one. Hope you all did enjoy. If you did, then how about hitting that like button, and how about subscribing to the channel if you're new? Thanks for watching.